Contrary to popular belief, muscle damage is not how you grow a muscle. Muscle damage is damage. The more you damage a muscle while you're working out, the less you will grow. So it is inversely related. So like if you're chasing soreness, man, you're really missing the boat. Hi, my name is John Jaquish. I am a doctor of biomedical engineering, which gives me a unique perspective on a lot of different things, human physiology related. Today, I'm going to talk about the different ways a muscle grows, and understanding this can really help guide your training. So I'm going to start off with the more standard ways, because there's ways that we understand very well, which is Cycloplasmic and Myofibral. You won't be tested on this, so don't worry. But it's important to remember the differences between these two. So you're gonna learn something here. These are the two main ways, Cycloplasmic, Myofibral. Then we have a Myofibral packing, which is slightly different than the first two. And then we also have Hyperplasia, which is the one we know about the least, but we know what happens. So let me go down the list, and I'm going to talk about how each of these things happens. And you're probably, with your training, if you're training successfully and growing muscle, you are getting all of these different types. But knowing where the different types of growth comes from is going to make you better at stimulating all of these types, because they're all very specific, and you don't want sort of a shotgun approach where you're just doing some stuff and hoping that other stuff, like these different types of muscular growth, are just happening. So number one, myofibral growth. So this is the growth of the bundles of actin and myosin, which look like this. They come together to create the contraction. So the actin and myosin are where the basically tension comes from. So all stimulus of all types of muscle growth comes from relevant mechanical tension through the muscle cell /fiber/myofibral, if you want to get down to the most basic levels. So when you create mechanical tension, you are lifting something. So my bicep, as I contract my bicep, and let's imagine I had a weight here, it would become heavy, in various positions, like depending on the biomechanics of the exercise, heavier or lighter in certain positions, and it's going to induce a level of fatigue at some point. So, contrary to popular belief, muscle damage is not how you grow a muscle. Muscle damage is damage. In fact, the more you damage a muscle while you're working out, the less you will grow. So it is inversely related. So like if you're chasing soreness, man, you're really missing the boat. You don't want to chase soreness. Also, a lot of people say, oh, I really feel the lactic acid. No, you don't. You don't feel lactic acid. Lactic acid and the associated metabolites that pool in the muscle after training, you want to leave them there so they can initiate the growth process. And it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be sore. So the vast majority of the muscle I have gained was through variable resistance, which started basically right around my 40th birthday. It was like 2 days after my 40th birthday. I am 48 now. So I was like, my 40th birthday, I was like an untrained guy. I looked like, just not like, if I made some sort of fitness presentation, you would look at me and be like, how the hell does this guy know anything? He's not strong. And I wasn't. I looked spectacularally average. So my fitness journey began then when I started training with variable resistance. I made the prototype of the first X3 and finally got it back from the machine shop. I actually launched the product about 1.5 years later. When looking at myofibral growth, this is the most sensitive to mechanical tension on a moment by moment basis. When going to fatigue and having, this is an important term too, velocity loss. Let's say I'm training with a certain cadence. I like a little bit slower cadence than a lot of people, because the slower you go, the more muscle tissue you actually get involved in the movement. Fast reps are great from a neurological perspective. I'll talk about that on another day. But if you're trying to grow muscle, nice, slow, and controlled. And as soon as that rate that cadence that you're using starts to slow down despite your greatest efforts, that doesn't mean you slow down. That means the weight slows down despite you trying to keep it at the same speed. That's velocity loss because of mechanical tension and exhaustion. So that's really where the myofibril growth is going to be happening when that velocity loss happens. And with variable resistance, which is the way I train, you get a lot more force through the muscle in the stronger range of motion. So when I'm here, you're 7 times more powerful, as I demonstrated with the medical device that I invented many years ago, compared to the NANES database, which is the largest fitness database in the world. When comparing the two data sets, you are so much stronger here than you are here. Once you know that, you can train accordingly, and that's variable resistance. So first, at the beginning of fatigue, the first fatigue point, now keep in mind, when you're lifting regular weights, you only have one fatigue point. When you're using variable resistance, you have many with a fresh muscle, which is part of the reason why variable resistance is so powerful. So I'm going through a range of motion, and when I go to fatigue at the top, and if it's a chest press, let's say it's 550 pounds, I can't get to 550 anymore because I'm beginning to exhaust. So I've had one failure point. Now I shorten the repetitions. What that first fatigue point is going to do is really show the central nervous system that many of the myofibrils couldn't hang. They were unable to continue that rate of work and that level of force. Mechanical tension, remember, very important. So when that happens, that first fatigue point in variable resistance is going to be a more myofibral type stimulus. So density of muscle. And now if you have inordinate amounts of this, and powerlifting can kind of do this. Now, I'll give you just a little teaser for the end. A larger muscle is a stronger muscle, period. And we'll talk about the science of that at the end of this. But if you're focused on lower repetitions, very high amounts of weight, training more like a power lifter, you're probably going to get more of the myofibral growth in the beginning. And you'll also have myofibral packing, which is sometimes considered a different way to grow muscle, but it really just means that your myofibrils are getting thicker and thicker. More actin and myosin are coming together to make more actuators inside of the cell. The myofibril becomes thicker, and then there's a smaller cross section represented by sarcoplasm, a greater cross section and sarcoplasm is really just a fluid in the cells that is there to store ATP, glycogen, and creatine phosphate. Those are the 3 fuels that you use while you contract the muscle. So now we can shift over to what is sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. So this is different. The way sarcoplasmic hypertrophy works is, instead of like myofibrils being based on the velocity loss, the fatigue of the actual myofibrils, those actin and myosin, sarcoplasmic hypertrophy comes from the exhaustion of the fuels that are held within the cell. So the ATP, the glycogen, the creatine phosphate, when those start to go away, well, that's where you get the pump from. So guys who are always chasing the pump, they're focused on sarcoplasmic a little more. And again, you get all types of muscle growth when you're doing this. You can bias it one way or the other, but eventually it evens out, and a larger muscle is a stronger muscle. I'll get to that at the end. So, and I'm just repeating that a second time because it's very important that you understand that you can't just get one without the other, but you can be focused on one or the other at certain times. So sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is almost the endurance mechanism of the muscle. And I don't mean endurance from distance running perspective. I mean endurance as you're doing repetitions. What's fatiguing first? Is it the actual myofibrils that are being called out, as in, like they're saying to the central nervous system, we cannot create the same amount of force, So we're going to stop creating that same amount of force, even though we can go through with the movement. I mean, like, even when you're exhausted, if I train my biceps, I can still do that and contract them, but are they capable of creating the same amount of mechanical tension? No, because I've gone to momentary muscular failure. And in the case of variable resistance, multiple points of mechanical tension. So when I'm doing repetitions in a chest press, at some point I start to fatigue. So that first maybe 1 or 2 fatigue points is more of a myofibral type stimulus. But we always go very high reps with variable resistance for a couple reasons. One of them is to enact sarcoplasmic hypertrophy towards the end while we're fatiguing the stretched range of motion. This is part of the reason the stretched range of motion is very anabolic. You don't want to bypass the low point. In fact, there's whole exercises in various programmings like low squats, low deadlifts, just focusing on that stretched range of motion. These are very anabolic, and here's why. As I'm going to fatigue here, it's not so much the momentary mechanical tension that's the problem. It's just continuing to do repetitions with even a low amount of weight, because when I go to fatigue towards the bottom of a chest press, I might only be dealing with 150 or 200 pounds, which is really light for me. But I've exhausted all ranges of motion to that point. I can barely handle that 200 pounds. So what is really happening is I'm burning through all the muscle glycogen, all the creatine phosphate, all the ATP. ATP actually comes first. So wiping that muscle out of all of these fuels, what does that do? That's a call for the central nervous system. All right, we need massive blood flow here. We need all the metabolites, and we need to store more fuel. Only way you communicate with your central nervous system is environment. You are creating an environment where first, the mechanical tension is too much in the strongest range. Then you're going higher repetitions. So your muscle cannot endure these continued contractions, while more mechanical tension, fatigue, and velocity loss is happening towards the bottom in these lengthened partials. That's what they're called. I kind of call it diminishing range, just for like the X3 protocol, but they're lengthened partials. And so you basically keep going until you can't move anymore. Both types of growth happen in every variable resistance set, and to a very high degree, probably the highest degree that your body is capable of growing muscle. So we got myofibral packing, sarcoplasmic growth. Now is hyperplasia. Now, hyperplasia happens for a number of reasons. It's seen very easily when looking through a microscope at an embryo. So when, conception happens and the child is growing inside of the mother's womb, we can see cells, muscle cells splitting. Now, we also know, based on analysis of strength athletes, that clearly this is happening during people's lifetimes, but we don't exactly know when or how to measure it. It seems sort of strange. A lot of scientists don't want to talk about what science doesn't know, but this is something that science is not really an expert on yet. However, we do know from some avian studies, bird studies, that if you stretch a muscle, most specifically when you stretch a muscle after it has a lot of blood in it, because you're putting stress on the length and the width by just increasing the blood flow into the muscle. At that point, when you stretch, now I'm not talking about the stretched range of motion during an exercise. I'm talking about after you're done. You have a pump, which means the casing of the muscle, what's called the muscle fascia, is highly stressed. And then you do high mechanical tension stretching. At the end of that, you can, at least what we've seen in animal models, elicit the splitting of cells, ultimately increasing the number of muscle cells that you have. Very difficult to measure in humans. We don't know if we're doing it. The way a lot of these birds were stretched was for like an hour at a time. I don't know if the sort of 25 seconds or 30 seconds of stretching after a hard set is really going to elicit that, but that is what I have people do after their sets, that is, especially their sets that went to higher levels of repetition, so they have more blood flow in the muscle, stressing the casing of the muscle fascia, and then stretching at the end of it after the workout is over. And all of these things happen, and it's almost unavoidable to a degree. And here's how I know that. Because last year, an absolutely spectacular study was published, which demonstrated that you can take an MRI of pectoral muscles, and with statistical significance, which is just a fancy way of saying 95% of the time we'd be accurate, you can determine somebody's 1 rep maximum bench press by doing an MRI on their pecs. This is so ridiculously profound, mostly because a bench press involves 2 whole ass other muscles. And despite the variance that would be created, now keep in mind, you can have a certain type of pectoral that might have a certain level of power associated with it, but they're not even measuring what the tricep or the deltoid can do. And those are 2 other muscles that are involved in that movement. So even with the inability to account for that variation, they can determine what your chest press is just looking at your pectoral. And that is so ridiculously powerful. And the likelihood of that actually even ever being useful data was like mind-blowing when this thing came out. And I think a lot of people realized that it was an important finding, but it's probably one of the most important findings out there, because now we know if you're chasing strength or if you're chasing muscle size, it's the same subject. And strength is a lot easier to measure and not nearly as subjective, because you can look at yourself in the mirror and go, God, I think I'm getting smaller. And you're just being dysmorphic. You're just nuts. But your strength, that's a hard number. And you now know that by chasing strength, you are going to be bigger. That's just full stop as a result of this study, which I think is absolutely magical. So important, such an advancement of science, and it really simplifies what we need to look for. So you are chasing strength from this moment forward, because that's the easiest way to tell if you're growing or not. Please answer in the comments if you have any questions about this, or if you want any details on the study. And if there's a lot of great questions, I'll make another video and get more specific. But these are the types of muscle growth that are going on while you're training. And now you know that no matter what you're chasing, if you think you're chasing muscle size, if you think you're chasing strength, really, it just comes down to strength, and you're going to get absolutely everything you want. I just made your life a lot easier. Make sure to subscribe so I can do this all the time for you. Thanks. If this video helped you, I want you to subscribe and follow. I'm going to put out videos on a regular basis. I think they're going to help a whole lot of people, especially if you're one of those people that doesn't just instantly grow from lifting regular weights. We've got the answer for you.